move on to 4.3, and we're going to start our proofs. The main thing that we're going to look at today is SSS, which means side, side, side. And what it means is if three sides of one triangle are congruent to three sides of another triangle, then the triangles are congruent. And so if I take a look at this, you'll notice it says that the order matters of the letters. What this says is that if I have this triangle and I say A, you'll notice on the other triangle, see I have A and then I have D, okay? And then it goes to B, which is a 1 hash. And then it goes D to E, which is a 1 hash. And then it goes from B to C, which is a 2 hash. And it goes from E to F, which is a 2 hash. So the order matters on the vertices and the sides and the order that you put them. Also notice that if this side is congruent to this side, that's a 1 hash. Okay, this side is congruent to this side, which is a 2 hash. And then this side is congruent to this side, which is a 3 hash. Because all three sides of one is congruent to the three sides of the other, that's what makes those congruent. Now that I can establish that they're congruent, I can start talking about more parts that are congruent to it. Okay, so here's our first proof. And again, when we do our proof, the first thing we start off with is the givens. So here are our givens, right? And I'm going to go line segment AB is congruent to line segment CB, and I'm going to write given. So you always start with the given, and you write it identical to what you see in the given. Now, some students that struggle with proofs, I'll go and I'll look at their paper and they don't mark up their picture. The key to proofs is marking up your picture because it becomes more visual for you. So you'll notice AB is congruent to CB, which means this section is congruent to this section. Okay, and then I have line segment AD is congruent to line segment CD, and of course that's given. And then I'm going to mark up my picture. And at the very end, you'll see the prove triangle ABD is congruent to triangle CBD. This is going to be the very end of our proof because that's what I'm trying to find. Now, what I need to do is come up with the other reasons. Okay, so let's take a look a little bit closer. So I got two sides that are congruent to the other two sides. I need the third side. So how do you think I name that? What's the name of the third side? Yes, BD. So I'm going to go BD of the one triangle is congruent to BD of the other triangle. And if I have BD is congruent to BD, what was the reasoning on that? Do you remember from your proofs? Reflexive. Very good. Yep, reflexive. Remember, it was like a reflection looking at itself in the mirror. Okay. So now I can go ahead and I can mark up my picture. And you're going to notice that the three sides of the one triangle are congruent to the three sides of the other triangle. So the reason is side, side, side. Questions? Okay, let's keep going. Try naming this set of triangles. They're congruent, so I need to name them so that their parts are corresponding. So I'm going to go triangle, and I'm going to name the first one A, B, C. I'm going to go congruent to triangle. Now I need to name the other triangle. So if A comes first, what's first on the other triangle? E is correct because it's a 1 hashy and a 3 hashy, 1 hashy and a 3 hashy that hugs that. And so I'm going to start with E. Okay, then on the other triangle, I go to B. What angle on the other triangle is in congruence with it? D. It is D, yep. because B is a 1 hashy and a 2 hashy, so D is a 1 hashy and a 2 hashy, and then finally we're going to go C because that's the third angle. So the order in which you put those angles does matter, and they need to be corresponding. Questions? Okay, let's go to the next one. Here we go. True or false? YXV. So YXV, is that congruent to LXU? Yes or no? Is that true or is that false? Look at the corresponding parts. True or false? It is true. If I take a little bit, look closer, Y right here has a 1 hash and a 2 hash that's hugging it, and L has a 1 hash and a 2 hash that's hugging it. And then when I go to the X has a 1 hash and a no hash, and the X has a 1 hash and a no hash, and then finally V. V is the leftover. Okay, let's go to the next one. True or false? ADB is congruent to EBC. That is false. Okay, so let's take a closer look at that. If I were going to rename that, I would go triangle ABD. I'm sorry, I'll rename it the way it was. ADB would be congruent to triangle. What would I name first? Yes, C is correct. And then E, and then B. So if it were to be true, that's how I would name it. Any questions on that? Okay, let's go to the final proof then. All right, so it is given that line segment AB is congruent to line segment BC. It's given. And I'm going to mark it up. Again, make sure that you mark it up. All right, the next one. D is the midpoint of line segment AC. That's given. Now, how I mark that up, because it's really hard to like show midpoint, I will take the picture and I'll put a big dot there, which tells me that's the midpoint. It's up to you. You don't have to, but it is something that I used in the past and felt it was helpful. Okay, then at the bottom, I'm going to put triangle ABD is congruent to triangle, and now I need to fill in that information. Okay, so what do you think? What do you want to do next on the proof? What do we want to show as far as congruence goes? CD, okay, CD is congruent to AD is correct. And what is the reasoning? Very good. Definition of midpoint. If you remember from our last proofs, we had a lot of definition of. The reason why we're doing definition of midpoint is right up above in 2, right here, it had definition of midpoint. If they're going to give you that information, they want you to use it. Okay, so what that means then is that this section is congruent to this section. Okay, now I need that third side for side, side, side. So what am I going to do with that? BD is congruent to BD. Reason? Reflexive. Now, in your book for the answers, it'll say like reflexive property of congruence or whatever. Just put reflexive. That's fine for me. And then finally, this is side, 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 but I need to name my triangle. So ABD is congruent to CBD. Yep, CBD, CBD. And then notice that I marked up my picture with the reflexive property. Questions? Okay, this is the start of proofs. It seems pretty benign, kind of easy at first, but it gets really wicked as we add more and more, like angle, side angle, side, hypotenuse, leg. As we add more, it starts getting kind of nasty. So make sure that you do your assignment and you ask questions.